Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Food Label Makers live webinar on common labeling mistakes and how to avoid them. Thank you so much for joining, and it's absolutely a pleasure to have you with us today. My name is Reem. I'm the Nutritionist and Regulatory Lead of Food Label Maker, and I'm also going to be your host for the day. Super happy to walk you through this webinar together. I also have on the call with me my colleagues Aya, Rachel, and Rana, our nutrition and labeling experts who are also going to be co-hosting today's webinar. Before we get started, I would actually love to get to know you a little bit better. So I prepared a very quick poll you may find in the chat box. The question goes, what is your biggest labeling headache? Is it nutrition panel formatting? Is it serving sizes, allergen declarations, or maybe other things? You can feel free to choose the option that best fits the closest answer, what you're looking for, and the answers will be visible in the chat box. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds just so that I understand your point of view. Okay, so I have some NFPs formattings. That's the lead answer. Serving sizes next, and then allergen declarations with others. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time to fill out this poll. So before we dive into the Can you guys still hear me? Okay, perfect. Great. Sorry, I think I faced a technical difficulty. So, as I was saying, thank you so much for filling out your answers for the poll. So, before we dive into the juicy stuff, I'd like to introduce you to today's agenda, okay? So, today we're going to be talking about 6 different things: why you should care, the top 5 mistakes brands usually make when labeling for compliance, real life product recall stories and what went wrong so that you can learn from these guys, how to tick off your regulatory checklist, when to DIY versus when to ask for expert help, and a small gift from Food Label Maker, which is a small regulatory toolkit that I had prepared for you so that you are more comfortable and confident doing your labels. Of course, we have a Q&A session at the end of our webinar together. It's going to be 15 minutes of open floor for your questions. Of course, throughout the webinar, feel free to drop in your questions in the chat box, and my colleagues will make their best so that they can answer your questions, and we can also address them by the end during our Q&A session if that works for you too. So, small pop quiz time. Let's dive right into the juicy stuff. I thought about maybe giving you a small throwback back to school, and I prepared a small pop quiz for you so that we can try to understand what's wrong with this label. So, from the first view of this label, I can catch around maybe 5 mistakes. Can you help me figure them out? Would you be able to put out your answers in the chat box? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds so that you really read the label and you can try to figure them out. And don't worry about it, there's no wrong answer. We're here to learn. Okay, I can see a few. Okay. Very good answers. Excellent answers, actually. Very good. All right. Oh my God, I think I have some stellar students in my chat box, so that's really great. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right into the different mistakes that this brand has done to their label. The first mistake, which is a very, very common mistake that I'm going to be talking about in a few, is the serving size. You can see here the owner has already set the serving size to read as 100 grams. That is incorrect, as the chocolate chip cookie, which is basically the product here, and the style of the label, which is the FDA label format, recommends that we use the reference amount customarily consumed for products in order to highlight a serving size. So, setting a serving size of 100 grams is incorrect, and it actually does not abide by the RACC guidelines that the FDA has set for your product. That's the first mistake. Rhoda, can you see my screen? Is it still there? Is everybody able to see my screen? Oh, okay. Very good. The second mistake, which by the way you have also highlighted, is that the field for the added sugar was actually removed. It was removed for reasons such as maybe they don't want to show that their chocolate chip cookie has a very high content for added sugar. So that's also misleading and that's incorrect. Another missing field is the potassium. So the product owner, the brand name, actually forgot to mention potassium on their label, and that is also incorrect as these are mandatory fields. If we look a little bit closer into the ingredient statement list, we can clearly identify a compound ingredient that was mentioned, which is the chocolate chips. Chocolate chips are usually sub recipes that you should elaborate on their sub ingredients in the ingredient statement list. Because sometimes, and actually that's the second mistake that's apparent here, is that they have hidden allergens that were not flagged. So, because we failed to flag the chocolate chip sub ingredients in the ingredient statement list, the allergen soy was also forgotten to be flagged, and that's a very, very big issue. Next up, which is also something that you have highlighted, excellent, is the may contain statement. The may contain statement suggests that it may contain nuts, and that is extremely vague because people have different types of allergies for different types of nuts and different specific types of nuts. So, after checking out all those boxes for the different mistakes that we caught, your label ideally should look something like this. Looking all the way from the top, you have a suggested serving size based on the RACC, which is 30 grams. You've also highlighted a household measure, which is the one cookie. So now it's easier for the client to read. You provide more clarity on your label, and it also matches the guideline. We have seen the added sugars added properly in addition to the potassium fields. We can also see a very, very intricate breakdown of the chocolate chips ingredient in the ingredient statement list, highlighting a hidden allergen, which is basically the soy lecithin, with the soy highlighted in the contained statement, and a very accurately done may contain peanuts statement, as it is exactly how the guidelines should mention. I'd like to leave you with a small takeaway, and this takeaway message is actually the basis of this entire webinar. Not to fearmonger or to spread fear or anything, but just to sort of point out some very important lessons regarding labeling and the ethical things that come behind it. One bad label equals to thousands of dollars lost and trust down the drain. And of course, no brand owner would ever want to do that. So, why should you care, really? The fact that you're already here tells me that you already understand how important labeling is. But let's take a moment to underline now why it matters more than ever. The very first reason is because a single mistake can trigger a huge recall. Even the absolute smallest oversights, like a misdeclared allergen, like in the case of this chocolate chip cookie, can result in pulled products and even worse, reputational damage. Because regulatory non-compliance carries financial risk, including, of course, the fines, the legal exposure, and reprinting costs, which add up quickly. Next up, because your consumers are watching you very closely. You know that we are currently in the age of proper reading for the nutrition facts panel and to checking out the different components of the label. So, not only consumers but also regulators are keeping a close eye on your label. And don't forget that accuracy builds trust and errors erode it. Also, mistakes delay launches and waste time. And of course, I don't think anybody would ever like to be late to a deadline and to maybe have more time spent to correct errors after printing. It's super inefficient, it's very expensive, and it's fairly stressful. And lastly, because your label is most importantly your first impression on this customer. It's not just about compliance. I mean, of course it is, but it's not just about that. It's about trust, the shelf appeal, and also standing out. The absolute wonderful news about these stuff is that these mistakes are 100% avoidable. So, let's get into the common labeling mistakes that we have usually seen among brands that basically got them into trouble. We're going to dive into the 5 main ones and we will provide examples and we will also explain every single mistake and how to avoid them. The very first mistake, usually, that is quite common and that we actually see it a lot on the labels, is basically incorrect serving sizes. Incorrect serving sizes, let's take the example of the FDA as a regulatory guideline or Health Canada, CFIA as also the regulatory guideline. So these are basically the main mistakes that you will often see when you are reading a label. So you've worked hard to develop your product, right? The label should back you up and not bring you down. So it's absolutely important that you are aware of the regulatory guidelines behind the country you wish to sell your product into. Let's take this example of this granola bar. So let's say I have a granola bar and I've labeled it as 10 grams for its serving size and I've suggested it as a serving size. Okay? However, the required serving size of granola is 40 grams under the product category set by the FDA. And by the way, this is a public record that you can always go back to, and we also have it on our website if you wish to go ahead and benchmark the serving sizes suggested for your products. So, why do so many brand names actually have their serving sizes wrong? Step number one, or reason number one, is actually because they're not aware of FDA's RACC rules, for example. So many businesses don't really know that their serving sizes are regulated, and it's absolutely not suggested. Next up is because they base it on package size instead of regulation. It's a 50-gram bar, so the serving must be 50 grams. That's not always correct. Third reason is they're trying to make nutrition numbers look better. We all know that if you decrease the serving size, the number of servings go up and your nutrition facts panel calculations appear more appealing, right? Because your calories are lower, your sugar content is lower, your sodium content is lower, but that is 100% misleading and it's actually non-compliant. Some brand owners also follow some copy pasting methods from competitors or even outdated labels. Mistakes get repeated when old templates are reused, or maybe you're using templates that have not been updated to the latest regulations, or maybe they're benchmarking their labels to similar products in the market and they're just simply going ahead and copy pasting it. That is also something that is a common practice, unfortunately. Lastly, incorrect convergence to household measures. So trying to maybe eyeball how many cups equals to 40 grams. So you end up putting a humongous number of cups, but the serving size, which is the weighted measurement in grams, is inaccurate. And this will definitely lead to inaccurate results. A small fun fact about this common labeling mistake is that is literally the most common mistake that we can see. And it's actually also the easiest to get it right if you know where you're looking. Next up is wrong label formatting. When you're labeling your product, it's not just about adding the information, it's about presenting it correctly. Wrong format or missing required elements could not only confuse your customers, but it will also land you in regulatory trouble. Let's look into the details. We have missing nutritional information, very similarly to what happened with our chocolate chip cookie, is that we have omitted some of the fields that we felt might maybe not look our label more appetizing for clients. So basically, some labels might omit mandatory details like calories per serving, total fat, or sometimes allergens, and it's just not just about skipping a few lines. Whether it is on accident, or on purpose, it can actually lead to serious compliance issues. Incorrect format for serving sizes, which is mistake number one that we spoke about. Incorrect servings or inconsistent formats, such as using weight instead of volume for liquid. Something literally as simple as this sentence. It can confuse consumers and, in some regulatory bodies, violate its regulations. So it's super important to be consistent. Font size and legibility issues. If the font size is too small or the layout is cluttered, consumers can't read important information. So let me give you actually an example on this one here. So let's say I have a very small product and I'm using the standard FDA label format to put it on my back of pack. But because my package is very small, I had decided to decrease the font size of the standard FDA label, and I have rendered it to be read incorrectly by consumers. So what will happen in this case is that I was supposed to use other types of label formats that fit my small package. A good example could be a simplified label format, a horizontal, the tabular as well. So these are just a few examples of this mistake happening. Incorrect template of the label, including non-compliant font type, size, design, nutrient order, inconsistent labeling across markets. A lot of consumers don't know that when labeling for multiple markets like Canada and the US, brands sometimes forget that every country has its own set of regulations, and you should follow the guidelines set by their own regulatory bodies, and that highly differs between country and another country. This brings us to the third most common mistakes, which is actually, and dare I say, the most dangerous mistake that we could actually do when we are generating our labels. It's the most sensitive, it's the most important one to take care of. And once again, it is literally the most important mistake that you guys need to take care of, which is basically incorrect or mislabeling allergens on your label and even mislabeling allergens on your label per the country's regulations. This might seem small, but an unclear or missing allergen declaration can result in product recalls or worse, serious health consequences. Even if the allergies or the allergens are included in the ingredient statement list, you still need to call them out in a clear contained statement. If there's a risk of cross contact, like using the same equipment. I give the example of peanuts in our chocolate chip cookie recipe. A precautionary may contain warning is critical, and in some countries, it's actually super mandatory. So, once again, just be careful that you are properly giving all the intention for your allergens once you are generating them in your label. The fourth common mistake is the ingredient statement list. It's super easy to overlook the finer details in ingredient formatting, but failing to declare sub-ingredients or using generic terms can lead to compliance issues and, actually more often than not, confusion for consumers. Authorities expect transparency, and so do your clients. So you should list exactly what's present in your ingredient statement list. Be as specific as you can, and also make sure that you highlight all the different details per sub recipes. So, step number one, sub ingredients must be declared. If you have a compound or a branded ingredient, let me give you the example. Let's say I'm creating a label for sushi and I actually am using soy sauce from Kikuman. So, I need to highlight the ingredient statement list from the Kikuman soy sauce. And of course, I should avoid using the name Kikuman because it's the brand name in my ingredient statement list. And this must be listed in parentheses. Next up is order of predominance. Ingredients must be listed in descending order of weight, including sub-ingredients, including branded items. You definitely need to use the right naming conventions. Use clear common names. A good example could be sodium bicarbonate instead of just listing bicarbonate. Avoid vague terms such as seasoning or mixes unless details are provided, or sauces, for example. Of course, there are some examples that will allow you to use seasoning mix, for example, but you should be aware of when you might be able to use this, and especially if they don't have any hidden allergens. So there's also something that you should keep a very close eye out on. Last but not least, you need to obviously declare your additives and your colors clearly. We should not just say colorants and preservatives. So we should basically highlight them by name or function. A good example would be contains sodium benzoate as a preservative. Let's put what we have learned to the test. For this common labeling mistake, which is the ingredient statement list, I have compiled two different ingredient statement lists. One is that correct, and one is that it's incorrect based on the FDA regulatory guidelines. You can see to the left, I have a very vague, super incorrect ingredient statement list. Let's dive into every ingredient. You can see I've mentioned oil. While that is not a very, very big problem, but usually going and opting for more specific details for your custom ingredients definitely helps. So it's better to mention that it's canola oil. Vinegar, also same thing. So it's better to mention that it's white vinegar because sometimes could be, I don't know, wine vinegar, red vinegar. So the more details you can provide in your ingredient statement list, the more clarity your clients will get from your label. You can see that the brand name here has used Mary's Special Spice Mix. That is absolutely 100% against regulations for a lot of reasons. Number one is because you've used the brand name and that does, like, nobody knows what that is. And the mix does not highlight its sub ingredients. So you can see to the right, we have named it as a spice mix, which is correct, and it has all those sub ingredients. Similarly speaking, for preservatives and flavoring, we have preservatives, the calcium disodium EDTA to preserve freshness, and instead of flavoring, we have highlighted it as a natural flavor. Last but not least, we also have the common mistake of net weight and recipe entry errors. You would be surprised that your label is really the front line of trust with your customers. If your recipe data entry is wrong, if you set up your recipe with an incorrect number of servings, an incorrect number of packages, your whole label could definitely become misleading. So we really need to be careful of the net weight, the serving size, number of servings, and the packages if I have a batch product. Okay? So let's dive into those details. So the first one is the net weight, which relies on accurate recipe setup, exactly what we said. So make sure that your recipe data is properly entered and it's not off. Next up, which is also something super common that we usually see when we're fixing our clients' labels, which is missing moisture loss or processing yield adjustments. So, of course, we have a lot of processing that happens when we are generating our products, such as baking, dehydrating, cooking. It could be frying, it could be literally any kind of process that would subject your recipe for moisture loss or other yield changes. Next up is, of course, the number of packages and the servings affecting the final label. And one also small thing is inaccurate ingredient entry. And of course, so let's say if you have a recipe, right? And you have entered the ingredient and it's raw versus its cooked form, or densities that are incorrect if you're doing beverage conversions from grams to milliliters. This will definitely affect the nutrition facts calculations on your final NFP. So you also need to be careful about that. Let's put that to the test. So, for net weight and recipe entry errors, let's say here I'm trying to generate a batter, right, which is a muffin tray. So, based on the calculations, based on my data entry, the total batter weight as the final yield for my muffins is, let's say, 1 kilogram. So 1,000 grams of batter produces 10 muffin and every muffin is 100 gram per muffin. Here, we fail to account for the 12% moisture loss that happens during baking. So the nutrition label, which is the final one, will read based off of a 100-gram muffin, but the actual baked weight is only 88 grams, and that is incorrect. So what you need to do in this case is that you need to correct for the final recipe yield adjustments after baking. So exactly what happened here. The 880 gram is the exact final product post moisture loss adjustment. So the resulting nutrition facts panel would reflect per a serving size of 88 grams, which aligns with the actual net weight on your package. Now that we have just spoken about the 5 top common labeling mistakes, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever made one of those mistakes? We promise we will not judge. You can see that you have a poll in the chat box that gives you like 3 answers. Feel free to answer whatever you want, yes, no, or can't tell. We've all been there, and we promise we will not judge you. Okay, all right. Excellent. So I have a lot of answers saying yes, which is absolutely okay. We're all here to learn, and I promise you this webinar will definitely help you. And we have a couple of no's and a couple of can't tell. Okay, lovely. So Let's dive into some real life recall stories that I would love to share with you. Please note that these are not hypothetical cases. These are actually real incidents that led to recalls, lawsuits, and in actually one heartbreaking case, loss of life due to anaphylactic shock. So, whether it's allergen mislabeling, formatting mistakes, or misleading serving size, each error really erodes consumer trust and it could expose companies to serious consequences. Let's dive into those stories. The first story is something actually that is a little bit of a very sad story, actually, which is the allergen mislabeling for a cookie. So basically, there was a mislabeled peanut butter cookie that was sold as an oatmeal raisin cookie. A consumer with a known peanut allergy consumed this product and tragically passed away due to anaphylactic shock because the consumer had peanut. Okay, great. I'm back again, guys. Can you hear me? Perfect. All right, lovely. So, as I was saying, the first actual recall story has led to an anaphylactic shock that a consumer faced due to a mislabeled peanut butter cookie that was sold as an oatmeal raisin cookie. So, that's something that we should really take care of. The second example is an incorrect allergen format, which is actually on a very sensitive product, which is a baby food product. So there was a very popular baby food brand that failed to include egg in the contains statement, despite the fact that eggs were highlighted in the ingredient statement list. Even though it appeared there, the contain statement failed to mention eggs, and this misstep posed a huge risk to infants with egg allergies and led to a very big recall of your products. The third example is wrong serving sizes, such as misleading cereal packaging, where a study found that cereal box images exaggerated the serving sizes by over 60%. This caused consumers to serve themselves significantly more than the labeled proportion and has contributed to a lot of confusion, has led to a lot of mistrust, and contributed to unintentional overeating. Another story is undeclared allergens in pita chips. So, this actually is an example of taking care of the allergens set by every regulatory body. So, a popular brand of pita chips was actually recalled across the UK for failing to declare mustard and celery as allergens. The oversight posed a major health risk for allergy sufferers, leading to a nationwide recall. Another example is vitamin overload in chocolate milk, where a fat free chocolate milk product was recalled after testing. So, apparently, what happened is that the vitamin D content revealed to be 10 times more the intended value. So, instead of 400 IU, it's actually 4,000 IU. This led to a lot of toxicity symptoms from consumers like nausea and calcium imbalances. Another example is multiple undeclared allergens, and you can see that we have a lot of examples of missing allergens on the labels, where several frozen food items were withdrawn due to mislabeling of crustaceans, fish, mustard, and sesame. The consumers were advised to return the products for a full refund, and it has also recalled and issued a public apology for that. So, Now, we actually want to talk about the fixes, right? So, the fix is actually super simple. It's basically a careful, compliant label that doesn't leave anything to chance. We should really never leave anything when it comes to chance, when it comes to the regulatory compliance of your label. So, how should you tick off your regulatory checklist to make sure that you are confident with the final label before printing? Step number one is understanding your market regulation. That's something that we had already spoken about. So basically, before you check where your product is being sold into, you need to make sure that you are familiar with the regulatory guidelines. So we have, of course, the FDA, Canada Health, such as CFIA, EU, or local rules. You need to know your target audience and absolutely know the region's labeling laws. And you need to use official guides to get started. Step number two is double checking label components. So, double checking label components exactly every single part. So, you have the NFP, format, size, required nutrients, ingredient statement list in decreasing order of weight, claims using health claims, exactly what's allowed in the regions and based on your cutoff points. That's also something you need to take care of. Step number three, review your labels format. Make sure everything fits on the package. The space, the text balance, font size must be readable, minimum sizes for NFP, allergens, or other key elements. And also, you should follow a label review checklist, which is a structured template to ensure compliance. Step number four is get an expert opinion. It's absolutely not a problem to ask for help if there is something specific that you feel might put you in regulatory jeopardy and it might put you in trouble. Just to do a quick check in the chat box, is everything okay so far? Very good. Last but not least, as we said and as we had checked today, it's always very important to keep an eye on the recall databases and what's happening in the market. It's fine, cross check those examples. Search the FDA recall databases or Health Canada for issues with similar products, especially if you have something similar that you're trying to produce a label for. Update your label as needed to reflect any newly issued guidelines, and you need to stay informed about the latest regulatory guidelines in terms of, let's say, there's a certain ingredient that was banned, maybe there was something that you forgot to mention, and it's always better to learn from other people's mistake to avoid doing them in your own labels. The next part of our webinar is basically to help you assess when should you do it yourself and when should you ask for expert support. If you need a hand, we've got you for both things. So many of you here, I'm sure, are extremely detail oriented. You want to be hands on and in control, and that's absolutely great. So, this is exactly why we built this platform for you. So, basically, if you're confident in the platform that you are getting, and that's exactly what we help you offer, we will make sure that you generate 100% regulatory compliant labels in over 6+ markets, and we can also give you a hand in reviewing those labels. If you would like to learn more about this, if you'd like to sign up, feel free to scan the code and you can book a call with me. And you can always pop a message in the chat box, and I will personally get in touch with you after this webinar is over. So that's the first part regarding doing it yourself. The second part is basically when we lend you a hand. Sometimes it gets tricky, and maybe sometimes there are a lot of regulations that you are unable or maybe you're not too confident navigating yourself. This is exactly where our service to hire an expert who will review your label or create it from scratch will come in handy. We will build the label for you based on your spec sheets or recipe details, and we will also guide you through tricky regulatory questions. Hiring a nutritionist expert from Food Label Maker grants you actually access to someone who has more than 25 years of experience in food labeling and compliance across different markets. As I mentioned, we offer compliance for more than 6+ markets. You just send us the information, we will take care of everything for you from A to Z, and that's all you need to know. If you are interested to hire an expert, You can also feel free to leave a message in the chat box, and I will also personally get in touch with you. Last but not least, I leave you with this, if you want, regulatory labeling compliance toolkit that you will also receive in your email as part of this recorded webinar. So you will get basically the example of the entire webinar, and you will get a recorded version that you can access anytime and anywhere. It has this labeling compliance toolkit that gives you access to different guidelines, sources, verification sources as well, label format checklist, and all the different details that we had discussed today. I truly hope you found this session insightful and interesting. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely a pleasure.